The wait is over! We're finally gonna delve into the bottomless catacombs of user-made levels. Let's play Super Meat World. The opening cutscene of Super Meat World differs from the rest of the cutscenes if only because, well, instead of referring a video game or anything regarding games in general, well, let's go for internet memes instead. These are always good. Super Meat World is not dead, it just smells funny, and we're gonna uncover the filth from all of it. Without any further ado, this is Super Meat World. We're gonna play the good custom levels this time around, because you may remember that I've done a series of videos where I will play a lot of really bad levels, but we're gonna stick to the good levels here. Into this update, I'm gonna play Cramps, but that is if I can find it into the recommended levels list, because instead of listing all of the featured chapters which were picked by Team Meat, instead it just randomly chooses among all of the list of featured levels and just randomly generates a list. So here, I've went through the entire list and Cramps is not even there. Allow me to express my anger right here. I mean, I'm pretty sure that I've saw the warehouse 10 times into this list, but Cramps not even once. Oh, and by the way, if you're searching for a chapter, do not go into the recommended list because it's not gonna show up anything. So yeah, as you can see, Super Meat World is off a flamboyant start so far, but we're gonna stick to the levels here instead of the mechanics of Super Meat World. So here we go, we're finally playing a user-made chapter. Cramps was designed by NovaSilisko, and it was his first chapter to be done, and it also was one of the first, if not the first chapter to be finished for Super Meat Boy. It also happened to be the first chapter which deserves Team Meat's seal of approval and made it so that it was the first fully featured user chapter, as in it will be onto the internet, Super Meat World. It was pretty much on every single version of the game as far as user level go. Usually only the cream of the crop will be deserving of this honor, and well, this chapter is certainly deserving of this honor because this is an incredibly early chapter. You might see that there are some parts into this chapter where the graphics are a bit rough, but judging by how early it's been done, it's a miracle that the level even looked that good. And they also managed to scare the crap out of you. I mean, what the fuck? Why so many rocket launchers? Well, there are so many rocket launchers because they have to be there. And the beauty of things is that it doesn't even make the level difficult. Cramps' big claim to fame was pretty much its middling difficulty, because most of the chapters on Super Meat World are reputed to be extremely difficult, as in, even though you've gotten Golden God, which is the achievement that you get for finishing the entire game, which means all level, bandages, warp zones, everything, well, you still have trouble beating those levels because the people who made most of these levels have absolutely no notion of difficulty curve in general. One thing that I especially hate of the internets and Super Meat World is the music. Thankfully, we're gonna shut it down and replace it with something else. The music that played by default on levels in Super Meat World and on the Xbox 360 version of the game was this song which was called Meat Spin, and I don't know. I really like the music that Danny Baranowski has done for this game, but I really don't like this song too much. This was actually the song which made me turn off the music for this game and just made it so that whenever I will play custom levels into the game, I would just play music in Winamp instead. Thankfully, you had the option later on whenever you will make levels and upload the chapters on Super Meat World to choose other music. And it was other music that was into the game, obviously, but hey, anything to get free of Meat Spin. So yeah, with the exception of the previous level, you might see that I'm not really struggling too much with this chapter, and I'm gonna bring back the comment that I did before I was interrupted with my talk about the music, but yeah, Cramps is mainly notorious for its difficulty, if only because, compared to most other chapters out there, it's a pretty accessible chapter, as in, if you've been in the Salt Factory, you should be good enough at the game in order to beat those. And we're talking about Light World Salt Factory here, not Dark World. I mean, for other chapters you might beat Dark World Salt Factory, and yet you will still be utterly destroyed by the difficulty of some of these chapters. So, welcome to Super Meat World, a gathering place where people who do nothing except playing this game are welcome, and nobody else. Isn't that a hoot? And yeah, some of these levels have pretty cool gimmicks, as you've noticed, because here the lasers move, and it's not really much of an hindrance considering that, well, you can always keep track of it easily considering that it stretches on for eternity, and whenever it's in the middle, well, there's no laser being shot all around the place, so in conclusion, it's a pretty neat obstacle, and even though it's new, it's really easy to deal with, so it's really not a huge problem, and then you're pretty much just having fun dealing with all of these new twists onto the game. Speaking of new twists onto the game, holy shit, that is something else that we've got here. A spinning laser all around the place. Also, just in case you couldn't notice, the name of some of these levels match the names of the songs that you could hear into the game Rise of the Triad, which is pretty neat if you ask me, because I really like this game and I really like the soundtrack as well, so it's a pretty neat nod. Whoops. You gotta stop whenever you get that key, but yeah, the thing that you probably notice is that you can't really stop anywhere until the final platform because there is a saw blade here, and the place where you'll be safe from the saw blade, which is shooting downward, is really limited, so this is a much harder level than the rest, but in overall, it's still pretty manageable. But yeah, my biggest gripes concerning Cramps, and in fact, this is probably my only gripe concerning this chapter, because in overall, it's an incredibly good chapter, but I don't know, the graphical design in most of these levels kind of feel dull and washed out, and in fact, I don't know, some of the placement of all of the decoration and all of this kind of feel haphazard, but this problem can only be summed up pretty much by the age of this chapter, because this is a pretty old chapter and there was virtually no state of reference that the author could have based himself on. If anything, this chapter was the state of reference for a whole lot of level designers for this game. This was the one chapter which started it all, and this is the reason why I'm doing it first. This was not the first user-made chapter which I've played. In fact, the first one that I've played was pretty much Paradise Lost by the same author, and this will be the next user-made chapter that we will play. But yeah, this was the first one which was done in. Okay, this level is pretty neat, I really gotta love that. It just does an incredibly good job of conveying a, oh my god, what the fuck is going on here? And even then, it still remains incredibly simple and easy to grasp. And that's the keyword for Cramps in general, easy to grasp. Instead of trying to go for overly complicated level designs and cranking the difficulty dial all the way upwards, it decided to base itself around speed and accessibility, because a whole lot of these levels are incredibly speedrun friendly. So, what's going on with Super Meat World these days? Well, the place is pretty much dead because, well, there was some hacking incident on it which pretty much made the developers pull the plug on it indefinitely, if only because, well, some people have found out that the SQL server in which all of the levels of Super Meat World were hosted on, that it had pretty limited security, as in no security at all. But yeah, some people pointed it out to Teammate and they were basically like, oh, don't worry, we got everything under control, we can do fine, just like this guy is doing into this one video for the internet. Okay, they didn't really say that, but come on, I need to acknowledge what's going on onto the screen every once in a while. But yeah, essentially because of Teammate's pretty nonchalant attitude about it and their refusal to do anything about it, well, some people just decided to teach them a lesson and delete the entire database. Don't get me wrong, this is an incredibly shitty thing to do, and well, the mere fact that you're pretty much just ruining the efforts of people that are pulling free stuff for all of this and potentially interesting levels without any kind of gain or anything is pretty bad and pretty lame, but in some way they went looking for it if only because of their refusal to do anything about it. I mean, some people are just there, okay, there is something that might be wrong with your database, but instead of being like, oh, thank you for pointing that out, we'll go check it, it was like, ah, no, everything is fine, ah. And that's pretty much the story of this game. A whole lot of unlikely coincidences that eventually led to the creation of this game. In fact, I'm surprised that this game even works, considering all of the little glitches and all of the little sort of things like that that pretty much can undermine the experience in general, and which makes it so that I'd be like, oh my god, how the hell was this game even coded? And the same pretty much applies to Super Meat World. In fact, it got off an incredibly shaky start, for those of you who were not there in order to witness it. Whenever you will play individual levels, it will instead show the names of the level into the forest, as well as the number of the levels in the forest, and it will keep cycling on through all of the chapter in the order that it appears, and basically, once you got to level 20, it will make the game crash, and therefore you cannot play more than 20 levels in any session of Super Meat World. Even to this day, Super Meat World is still rather broken because, well, there is the recommended level list, as you've seen, which was pretty buggy because instead of showcasing a particular display of all of the levels that are featured, it randomly chooses into a list, and it will make it so that you will not see certain chapters in it, but you could see a certain chapter in it like 10 times, so yeah, it's pretty dumb. Instead of choosing random chapters, they should have made it so that it will have one comprehensive list. But when you will search for other chapters, the proper ratings will not show up. Whenever you're playing chapters, you can't even see the name of the level, so this is why I have to edit them into the video so that you can see them. This level, unfortunately, is pretty boring, but thankfully it looks really neat. But yeah, the last level, unfortunately, really tarnishes the chapter a bit. Funny because it's an incredibly gimmicky level. Yeah, you have to drop in at the right time. Yeah, I know I didn't really talk a whole lot about the gameplay of this chapter in overall, but it kinda speaks for itself, and well, I wanted to talk more about Super Meat World instead so that we're never gonna have to talk about it again. And thankfully, this chapter is pretty self-explanatory, as you might have noticed anyway. So, that'll be it for Cramps. A pretty nice and easy chapter in overall. It's definitely worth playing, and it's for all people of all ages. Coming up next, Paradise Lost by NovaSilisko.